Welcome, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Robert Griffith, and I'm here from 3D Printing Club and 3dpc.tech and FreeTutorials. And today we're going to be doing a review of another printer, and as you can see behind me, and it is the XYZ daVinci Junior 1.0 Pro. And I'm doing this from a different perspective because I've been a teacher for 20 years now. I've taught middle school and high school and college, but my daughter is a teacher and she teaches elementary school. And so we've been looking at these kinds of technologies and trying to figure out a good fit for a school setting. 3D printing is an amazing thing to include in school. It builds upon different aspects. For example, STEM, science, technology, engineering, and math. And you could think about all the things if you're like, and the new push is STEAM, science, technology, engineering, art, and math. And I think a lot of times people think art and they think, oh, color crayons. But to me, it's more of design. So I think instead of STEAM, it should be STEMmed, science, technology, engineering, math, and design. But we'll get there eventually. Anyway, so 3D printing really brings all of that into the educational setting. Now, there are different kinds of printers, and I'm going to hopefully show you some of those real quick. And this one is kind of interesting. As you can see, it's enclosed. It looks large, but it's really not as large as it seems. And I'll show you why here in a minute. And this one actually pops open, and you can see the inside here. The filament is in here, the print head is up here, the build plate is down here, and the controls are here. All of the things are right here. Alright, now let's look at these other printers that I have set up, and we'll discuss why there could be a problem. So one of the more exotic types of 3D printers that you can get today is a resin printer, and this is my One-How Duplicator 7, and I love the printer, and the only thing is you can see all those bottles of liquids and such that are in front, and that is the actual resin, the liquid resin. And if you have all these resins in here, you know, there's warnings and, you know, things that you have to be careful of. And these types of chemicals are often not even allowed in schools. For example, if we get bugs in our school, we're not allowed to use regular pesticides. So the other thing about this is that the smell of a resin printer is pretty gross. It's strong and it smells like chemicals, and even though I think it's fairly safe, I believe that what would happen is you'd have a bunch of kids going home sick and claiming headaches, and you know, not just kids but staff too, and it is pretty overwhelming sometimes. Plus you've got this just vat of liquid here, and it does smell, and it's a messy process. You have to wear rubber gloves, you have to use you know, protection to get the stuff clean. You have to take things out, soak it in alcohol, take it and wash it in a sink, and so on. So I don't think that the resin printer, at least at this time, is a real fit for a school or classroom. Maybe in a college, if they have a vent like they would have in a chemistry lab. Okay, the other kinds of printers are the standard moving bed 3D printers. Okay, next I'm going to show you a couple examples of standard 3D printers, kind of the typical 3D printer that you would expect to get for a classroom or whatnot. Now, the One-How Duplicator i3 Mini is a great printer, but as far as in a classroom, I'm not sure with the filament just kind of acts out here. Kids sometimes will play with the filament, and if this gets just a little bit tangled, the filament tangles up and doesn't go through. Now, I have not had that problem with this printer, but I haven't taken it to a classroom. I have had my daughter help me. The other thing is the print head is very hot, obviously, and children can touch this, and sometimes teenagers like to touch it because it's hot. The other thing is this build plate is made to move around, like back and forth. This goes back and forth like this, and this will go back and forth like this. Alright, so as this is going back and forth, if somebody sits something here and it comes out and stops it, or somebody pushes the printer back a little ways to get it out of the way, and it goes and it just hits the wall, it messes up your print. Alright, so that can be a problem. Overall though, not too bad. A little one might stick his finger or her finger in the gears up here, and that could cause a problem, but I don't foresee that happening really terribly a lot. The next one is this 3P printer, and you can see some of the same concerns. For example, this will pull back and forth, this will pull back and forth, and you have some gears and stuff that can maybe get kids wound up, but again, that's not really probably going to happen. You just have to be, you know, careful of the what ifs. The other thing is, up here at the top is the filament, and that's great, except that it kind of goes all around, and a kid can wiggle that filament and it'll just break off, depending on the filament, obviously. That one you see is not connected, and the reason it's not connected is because my cat saw it going back and forth and knocked it off. So this is not just a thing for children to, you know, to concern for children. So what I'm going to do now that I've shown you some printers is I want to demonstrate this printer, and you can look in there, it's clean. I have not printed with it yet. So everything that you see that I work on today is going to be out of the box, hooked up, ready to go. No experience with the XYZ the XYZ daVinci Junior Pro 1.0. But I really, like I said, I like that it's encased. If this is closed, I can still see kind of what's going on through the plate here. Not sure if you can see through there, but I don't have to worry about a kid or a cat or anything getting into the filament. I don't have to worry about somebody touching the hot end. I don't have to worry about something getting in the way of the build plate. And seems like a nice, well put together machine. I've been impressed with it just hooking it up. Okay, so it's a pretty, I don't want to say hefty printer. It's about 26 pounds, but it's not super lightweight, but it's not going to be something that's going to, you know, fall and kill somebody. We have a 2.6-inch display here, and I haven't taken any of the protective coverings off of anything because I want everything to look new. Alright, so now we're to the exciting part. Let's get started. I'm nervous because I haven't turned this thing on yet. Alright, now you can see that the cords come out the right side of the printer. It's my right side, the printer's left side, I guess, depending on how you look at it. There's also a power switch right here, which is awesome. Just remember, when you set your printer up, you'll probably want to set it up on the other side of your computer, because the cords have to go around and all the way over to the other side of my computer, because I wasn't thinking ahead. And the other thing is, the power cord is fairly short, and I'm not saying short like it's going to be a problem with you at home, but if you're setting this up in a classroom, we tend to not have a lot of outlets, power outlets, and at least in my schools that I've worked in, and we're not allowed to use extension cords. So that will determine where you set up. Now, I have been in schools where we had a long, beautiful counter with plugs along the entire thing that was set up for technology. It's just that I'm in a rural Appalachian school right now, and we are dealing with what we've got. All right. So anyway, let's get this thing going and see what we do. All right. Initializing. Please wait. Ooh, that's pretty cute. So, daVinci Junior Pro, build SD card. I'm not sure if it's going to be that quick to get started. Oh, click OK, sorry. Sample. Now, I haven't calibrated anything. That's literally the first time I've turned this thing on. Actually, I don't even know if I actually loaded the filament all the way through. As you can see, the filament comes up through this filament tube, and it looks like I have a blue filament in there, and it's doing its leveling and such right now, and I think what this is doing right now is self-leveling. The build plate came with tape on it, so I didn't put any glue or anything. This is just straight out of the box. I'm trying to look at this as if there was some teacher out there that got a new printer, didn't really know what to do, plugged it in, and just went. So hopefully this will happen. There may be some ugly jump cuts here and there if this takes a while. Sorry you have to look at the side of my head. While it's heating the extruder, 80, 85, actually heating pretty quick. You may notice I'm in a smaller space right now. My adult children moved back in with me, 3 adult children, and they've taken over my maker space with storage. So I'm in a corner now. And if my eye looks weird, I just got my eye patch off. I had an eye injury that's kept me down for a week. So if you get weird reflections or something, that's what's going on. Random information you don't need to know. I'm here to serve. 160 Celsius, 163, 166. Looks like it's actually going pretty well though. I'm not sure what the sample is. I'm not sure how long it takes to print. As I said, this is just a let's see what happens. Looks like I did a little test bead. Very small, like high resolution. I'm not exactly sure where the print head is, so I don't really see anything yet. There may not be anything coming out. Oh, actually, that's a nice bead on there. Well, I'm impressed. I'll try to get this closer so you can see it. And that way you won't have to look at me. Okay, I went ahead and opened the protective screen, this thing right here, so that you could see it a little better. The light went off after a minute or two. But you can see it building. I mean, I didn't level anything or set it or anything. I just told it to hit a test print. See if I'm trying to figure out it's going to be better to zoom in or out. Maybe I'll leave it out for a little while until we get something more solid, get that ribbon out of the way. I apologize if there are focus issues. I think it's a combination of low light and the movement of just the print head. It's kind of throwing off its perspective. Need some epic presentation music while this thing brings it to us. Alright, so now we're to the point where I get to take this off, but what I want to do is I want to get something to slip under this piece. I'm trying to do it without chipping the piece or tearing the tape because I like to reuse the tape. There we go. I do it slowly. You can get enough of those fibers to disconnect from the tape, it'll pop up easily. That's better. I think some of the tape's coming with it. We'll just have to deal. Yeah, we'll have to replace that tape. For the printer and for having a school printer, I think this is going to be beautiful. So now let's get to the hard part, and that is going to the computer and printing a model through some sort of a slicer or other application. Alright, here we go. Okay, so I wanted to just show a couple prints that I've done with this printer. This is an older model from Thingiverse, and the reason I like to use this one as a test is because it prints without supports. And the only reason I'm doing it so that it prints without supports is that so that my removing the supports doesn't compromise the structure or the markings on the piece. And so there's two different filaments here, clearly. I mean, it's as different as black and white, right? Anyway, the one on the left is the black one, and that's the stock filament that came with the printer. And the one on the right is Mars 3D filament that seems like a good quality print material. And they both print the same. They have the same kind of differences in, where the striations are, and things like that. Now, I'm not sure if I can get in here and show this any closer with any decent light, but it does a pretty good job. This is back when it was fairly low poly, so it's not super detailed, but I like it. And I actually have a lot more prints that I could showcase, but I've given them away as gifts since Christmas was yesterday. And my children, when they see me printing something, everybody's discussing who gets to keep it. So anyway, it's very good, and I've been really happy with this. In fact, it sounds corny, but it's kind of reignited my love of 3D printing because it's so easy to jump in, grab a model, ask the kids to look through a list of stuff and print it, that it prints without really a problem. And again, as you'll see over here, I don't have the stock filament installed anymore, but through the back, running up along these lines through here, you see a different filament, and that runs through the back. And that's one of the nice things about this, is I could leave this filament hanging here. It's just that I took it out to work on something else, and I didn't put it back in yet. But it doesn't really matter because I have the filament coming in through the back. Now, obviously that's not what you want. You want to have it on this if you have the, if you're worried about people touching it or whatever. But I like to have several different kinds of filament, and so rather than ever having to change this out, I could have a rack sitting behind the printer and just run the spool through that feeder tube on the back hole, and it goes up and around and down into the print head. So I could print a blue one, and then a green one, and then a red one, and then a glow-in-the-dark one, or whatever, if I've got the filament for it. Anyway, so I'm going to go in and show you some of this now, and I hope you enjoy. So one of the things I want to do to test my printer is to jump out on the internet and find something to print. So here I went to Thingiverse and found this cute owl cuddling thing that I figure I'll get from my sister, and I can do download all files, and note there's a thing here to tip the designer, and when I'm done with this I will go through and give that designer a tip. And what that does is it helps us to keep these kinds of things moving forward. We want to keep people designing and making things available for free. Now I'm going to print this, but I wanted to show you real quick. If I click over here on one of the blue models, there's a thing that says Thingy View. Alright, now it's downloading the model now, and I can drag it around. I can zoom in. It's a very cute model. And I can also go over here and show my owls in a folder. And so you'll notice that it comes in a zip file. And so what I usually do is I just use my right mouse button and I drag it out and I extract it. But what I want to do here is put it somewhere where I know I'm going to find it. So what I'll do first is I will cut or copy, go to my desktop and find my 3D models folder, and then paste. And then I will unzip it from here by using my right mouse button and dragging it over and just doing extract. Alright. So I have too many things in here. My Cuddling Owls files are in here. There's a README and a license and an attribution card if you're going to display it, some pictures, etc. And so this has two files in it. Let's see, they're both STL models. And this says Cuddling Fowls Fix 2014, and this is 3 fowls, 1 full hollow. So I imagine that this fix is probably the updated model. So what I can do is I can just drag that down over here to my XYZ printing software, and it loads it. Every once in a while it will come up with one that will actually say that it found an error in. I'm not sure if this one will or not. I don't think it's necessarily an error. I think it's something that XYZ Pro... Oh, there we go. Problem found with the model. Do you want XYZ to auto-repair the objects? Yes. Alright. And so it's loading the model now. I'm going to go ahead and expand this screen here so we can see the whole screen. Don't really need it, but you know, it'll be better this way, I think. I'm not sure what the delay is here. Usually it doesn't stop there, but maybe this is the repair that it's doing. Alright, so there is my owls, and not sure if this is going to need support or not. I'm going to go ahead and try it without. And so some of the tools over here, if you need to move it or rotate it, you know, like for example, maybe I want to go in and rotate the x-axis by 10 degrees. Alright, so obviously that's not what I want to do. So Control Z is undo. What's the y-axis? Maybe I'll do that by 10 degrees. No, that kind of rotates it up and off the floor. Not what I want. So I'm going to go back to rotate, and I'm going to change this back to 0. Alright, I'm going to try the z-axis. I can't really see what it rotated, but it probably rotated it top down. So anyway, the other thing I could do is I can scale this. Maybe I want to print this larger. So I can grab something and drag it up. That's out of the boundaries, clearly. Alright, so there we go. Now, right now it's showing it in centimeters. And what I can do is I can go in and tell it, let me see here, if I can remember where to put this now. Printer, daVinci Junior, editor, show it in inches. And I can see that my owls are going to be about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.5 inches on the base. That's actually pretty large. I'm not sure if I'm going to scale this back down a bit. So if I did something like that, that's just, you know, a few inches across. And for a start, for a test project, that might be what I want to do. So all I really do is once I get it to the shape and size and rotation that I like, I click up here on the print button, and it comes to this screen, and it's checking to make sure you want your nozzle at this degrees and your nozzle diameter here. The nozzle diameter, unless you've changed your nozzle, shouldn't change. I can tell it whether I want supports or not, tell it what speed I want it to print. I may want to tell it something else, my layer height. I might want to make this a little bit smaller, or make my shell a little bit different. Set my infill to be, if it was 100%, it would be solid. Alright? And anyway, when I'm all ready, I go ahead and click print. And I still have my things sitting on my plate over here, so I need to move those things off. And I think I'm going to go ahead and close the screen here. I have to move my camera for 1 second. And then maybe I'll reposition so you can see here. And I'm going to click over here where it says slicing complete, print. And I can rotate this around and I can see that it didn't put any supports in there. I have a feeling that these beaks are going to not stick to the face, because as it goes out to print without a support coming down, and a support can be, for example, a strand of filament that, or not just a strand, but a little small stack of filament that goes all the way to the bottom here that gives it something to bridge off of. And sometimes it doesn't take much. Alright, I'm going to go ahead and let that go, because if it does do that, then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. So I'm going to try to jump this into fast motion once it does start printing, and once you can kind of see what it's doing. Once I can get a zoom. Now, you'll see as it says down here at the bottom, the object is transmitting. Alright, and so in this situation, this model is taking a long time to transmit, and I think it's because it's a high resolution model, even though I'm printing it very small. Alright, so it says building. As you see the print head come down over here, you'll see the base will hit the plate, reposition itself, reposition again, and what it's doing is it's auto leveling here. Alright, so right now it's heating the extruder. It's up to 31 degrees, 35, 40, 46, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait for it to it'll get to 200, and then it will start a bead down the side, and then it'll move over toward the center of the plate and start to build the little owls. I'm using no prep on the surface, nothing but that painter's tape or masking tape, depending on what you call it. These were nice pieces of large masking tape that came with the printer. So for example, they're on sheets that look like this. Looks like giant post-it notes, but it's got a texture. I'm actually looking to buy some more of those once I'm done with using these up. I also have my trusty purple disappearing Elmer's glue sticks, and those work well too. I just don't need them on this for some reason. I've used them a lot on other printers. I do have to say that I really enjoy this printer, being able to take different types of filaments without too much of a problem. So here it's going and printing a bead down the side, hopefully. Yeah, looks like a nice little bead down there. So this is usually when I get a pretty good idea of how big the piece is going to be when it prints. Sometimes I'm a little off, and because it's printing underneath there, you can't really see it very well, but I see one of the owl's feet, a little outline of it. Maybe I can zoom in a bit. Most of what it's printing is going to be blocked for a moment. So you can see the toes in the background there. Usually what it does when it prints an object like this is it will do an outline, and then it will come back in and fill in the infill and make it a nice flat surface. And that's what will be sticking to the tape, hopefully. And then it continues it by raising up a little bit. In this case, I think it was 0.3 or 0.4 millimeters, and it'll do the next layer, and then the next layer, and then the next layer, and it'll continue like that until it's finished printing at the very top of the object. In this case, the top will be the ears if it gets that far. Every once in a while something will break away from the plate or just not adhere correctly. You know, I may have touched the tape with something on my hands, oil on my hands or something, or it just may not have adhered enough. Maybe the plate was too cold or whatever. Maybe there was a bubble in the filament. Alright, so you can see some shapes coming out a little bit under there. And the back and forth usually means it's doing a layer of filling in one of the shapes or something. Now I have this set for 10% infill, so what it'll do is it'll make a honeycomb sort of shape on the inside, and that's so that the thing doesn't have to be solid. It'll do a honeycomb shape to give it structure and, you know, still be solid without having to be filled. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and let this print for a little while and see what happens. My printer right now says it's been going for 5 minutes and estimated is 10 hours and 39 minutes, but that's because the percent hasn't gone up yet. Don't freak out when you see that, because probably I'll come back in 15 or 20 minutes and it'll say the time remaining is 1 hour, something like that. It just now dropped to 5 hours. So in the very beginning, it's really trying to figure out how much time it's going to take. For example, it's done a certain number of layers now and it's gone to 1%, so it thinks that to do the rest of the layers is going to be 5 hours and 45 minutes, and after it does a second percent or a third percent or a fourth percent or whatever, it'll recalculate that. For those of you who are used to old school computers, it's like when you go to copy something and it tells you it's going to take 28 days, and then a few minutes later it says 5 hours, and then about a minute later it says 1 minute. So anyway, that's the kind of way it goes. So I will be back in a few minutes and we'll see if we've got something on here. Alright, I'm going to zoom out a bit so you can get a better view if it does start to work. Thank you very much. Well, we ran out of film. I guess it's technically not film since we use digital now. We ran out of space on our chip. So we missed a whole bunch of this. So rather than do the whole filming, I figured I would just show you that it's still going, and then when it's done we'll come back and look at it and see if the beaks worked. I was hoping to be able to film it, and I thought what I was looking at from this side was the feet, but what we're seeing is the left foot and the tail. So anyway, we will be back and looking at the finished product in just a few minutes. Well, this is one of those things that you wake up to when you're 3D printing. As you can see probably from the top of the owl's head, it didn't quite finish. Now the screen says filament jam. The good thing about this printer is that when it does detect a jam or something's not right, it stops printing. But I haven't looked at the front yet. This is just what I came into a few minutes ago. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to open it up, I'm going to peel it off the build plate, and I'm going to show you the models. Alright? Alright, here we go. Let me have to move this out of the way. Alright, now if I pull this slightly, let's see. And that's about how they usually break off. Now, as you can see, the beaks actually worked. They stand up and they still get a good profile. They still printed pretty solid underneath. Cute little print. I may have to 3D print a little hat or something to put on his head so I can salvage the print. But one of the things I enjoy about prints that don't work is finding a way to save them. Anyway, so this also lets me show you the kind of, this is a rectangular infill. The other stuff that looks like honeycomb, that's one of the options. I just didn't set it on this piece. Anyway, that's an example of a finished 3D print. that didn't quite finish. You can kind of see from the top of the other owl's head what it would have looked like had it finished, but it's really not too bad. You got almost all the detail, so let's move on to the next part. Okay, so overall, what are my final thoughts? I really like this printer. It's, I think, going to be the printer that I use to do my general work. I had a couple jams, but I was able to easily fix those. The one jam that stopped my owl printing, I figured out was not really a jam as much as me putting my filament in the wrong place in the back, and it kind of bunched up with the cords. That comes with the cords coming off my right side of my printer around the back. I think I'm going to reroute that stuff. And the next thing was, I took apart the nozzle, which, well, I won't do it right now, but basically there's a push button to pop the nozzle off, and you can look at it to clean it. And when I did that, it was nice and clean. And so I popped it back in and looked in the back, and I just did unload filament, and the filament backed down and then wouldn't go out the back through the feeder tube. So I pushed it a little bit and it popped loose. And when I was able to reload the filament, it just went right in and cleaned right out. And I think that fixed all the problems I had. So as far as a classroom use, I really feel like this would work. I would use it as a student-used piece in my classroom. It's solid, it cleans easily, it prints well. I haven't tried the finer prints to see if I can get the things to smooth down really well, but for what students would be doing and for the time that it would take, I think I would just leave it on the standard setting. Other than that, I'm happy. Honestly, it's probably one of my favorite, if not the favorite printer that I own right now. I loved my quality of my old-time MakerBot Replicator 2. But that's probably mostly just because that was my first exposure to a 3D printer. But this thing it works really well. So thank you for hanging out with me and for watching this. And if you have any questions, please feel free to let me know. Thank you. Bye.